Cool. So welcome everybody. As you probably heard, my name is Peter. I'm a teacher during the summertime. Most of you is out in California doing training out there. So thanks for coming out to hear me talk. I know I'm not the headliner usually. So I think this week I said that we'll talk about what I'm calling attention fitness, which I partly stole from, I heard from two sources. One was a spiritual teacher named Kenneth Folk, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, coined the word contemplative fitness. And recently there's also been a lot of talk, more and more, in just modern culture around good habits for work and our minds in this time with a lot of distractions. And the recent writer, Mark Ransom, wrote what he called attention diet. So I just took 2 words from both of them and put them together. Came up with attention fitness. And so what they both looked at, and what I also did some research on, was the idea that, say, a few hundred years ago, before the Industrial Revolution, physical fitness as a big mass movement wasn't a real thing. There's always been, in cities and civilization, people who did physical fitness, but nothing to the degree that we have today with all these fitness classes and yoga and gyms and different workouts and all this stuff that is almost normal and expected that you have a physical fitness, right? Whereas maybe 200 years ago, when most of us were farmers, there was no need for that, and it would have been strange you said going out for a jog for 5 miles for fun or something. Why? We just worked 12 hours, why don't you rest? And so, as we all moved into cities, as we got industrialized, as we started sitting at our desks the most of the day, our bodies weakened. We, on one hand, thought, oh, we're sitting in the lap of luxury. We don't need to work our bodies anymore. We can just sit and have the entertainment come to us. But it turns out that's not very good for our physical bodies, and we need our physical bodies to function in the world. And similarly, we see a similar movement happening in pretty much every sphere of human life. So from mental health to work productivity to relationships and community to just the raw ability to focus and pay attention is, just in my lifetime, changed drastically, such that we were coming up with more and more practices and having to regularly exercise things that we might have taken for granted 10, 20, 30 years ago. So we have things like authentic relating practices, where people come on a weekend day in a park, say, and practice how to genuinely connect and be authentic with each other. This is a real thing that I've participated in Burlington, in Oak Ridge Park, where we all came together and spent 2 hours just doing different artificial exercises to connect with another human being, to fulfill that social need of feeling like I'm relating to another person from a genuine place. And at the end, everyone shared, or most of the people shared, how most of the time they feel so lonely and alone and disconnected, and that this practice was a great way to connect. Or up at the monastery in Lowell, one of the things a lot of the people have to learn is just basic work productivity, things like getting things done, or task management, or project management, or learning how to prioritize or do tasks in a certain order. Things that 100 years ago you didn't really have to do, because the way we farmed was the same every generation. The way we built shoes was pretty much the same every generation. You would innovate once you become a master, maybe. Whereas now, the nature of work for most of us is so changes so rapidly that we have to now actually learn systems of how to work, not just the work itself, but how to handle the work that we're supposed to be doing. And maybe most problematic is that we have to learn how to focus now. Whereas before it was a skill that a few random weirdo monks would learn to gain spiritual insight or something, or meet God. Now it's something that the mass culture is doing, such that it's on Time magazine, and it's on Oprah, and it's just widely known. There's this practice called mindfulness. It helps you concentrate, it helps you do your work better, it helps you feel less stressed, and it's prescribed pretty much everywhere these days. And no surprise, because if you look at the 3 most popular websites in the world, it's Facebook, Google, and YouTube, which are also some of the richest and most powerful companies in the world, whose sole and major income source is selling advertising to companies to sell to you. And so each of us are the product for other companies to bid on to get our attention. How long the highest bidder gets to take and capture and feed information to us, our attention, and that these companies are working to capture more and more of our attention, gather more and more data about us, and then sell it to the highest bidder, such that we can enjoy sort of limitless amounts of entertainment and content and information. Most of it's just pretty low quality and not actually that impactful or useful for our lives. Many YouTube videos I watched a few days ago I don't think had a positive, real impact on my life. And yeah, I spent a while watching many entertaining videos. And so each of us have access to more content than we could ever consume in multiple lifetimes. And most of it is not helping us, which is no surprise because they're not trying to optimize for our well-being or growth, but just to keep our attention on the web page longer so they can sell more ads to us or gather more data about us. And so that's a problem, such that these days if I go out with friends to say a restaurant or something, it's not long before one of us is on our phones checking our Facebook or posting something on Instagram or messaging one of our family members or checking in on the news or just doing something where we're constantly distracted, fragmenting our ability to actually focus on what's just happening in front of us, on whatever we deem to be important in the moment. Generally, when we talk about physical fitness, you could break down physical fitness into 3 components. There's the obvious thing, which is the physical exercises, doing push-ups, jogging, swimming, rock climbing, whatever the physical activity is. We do physical activity to strengthen, gain more endurance, work out our heart. That's pretty obvious. The other 2 components of fitness would be nutrition. What are we taking in? What are we eating? Is it meeting our needs? Is it too much? Is it too little? Is it good quality? Is it bad quality? Is it the right proportion of fats, carbs, protein? Are you losing micronutrients? All of that. And then rest. Are we getting sufficient rest? If we just work out all the time 24/7, or too much, and not enough rest, then we'll just actually hurt ourselves in the long run. So what would the similar thing be for if we're doing attention training? Obviously we have meditation, mindfulness, we have practices to learn how do we concentrate better, how do we use our mind to focus on a focus object and stay there. We do that every week here, we do that at the monastery every day, so that's pretty obvious. And largely what the story would say has been sold to most of us in the West the past 70 years or so has been meditation practice, meditation practice, meditation practice, unless you go to some Tibetan communities where then maybe you'll do some prayer, devotional practices, other places you might do some chanting or prostrations, but for the most part, we were ready to accept meditation practice, so we got meditation practice. But the other 2 parts are also really important. If we look at nutrition, that would be, I would say, as a very loose metaphor, your surroundings. What are you taking in? What are you reading? Who are you hanging out with? How do you spend your free time? What books are you reading? What articles are you digesting? Who are the people you surround yourself with? Turns out for most of us, we're just a product of our surroundings. The product of the people we hang out with. As much as we like to think we're individuals, and if I just work on my willpower strong enough, then I can be an individual that isn't swayed or influenced by our surroundings. But it turns out our surroundings matter a lot. And one of the main reasons the monastery is so powerful, or a community like this comes together on Sundays rather than practicing at home by yourself, is that the people around you matter a lot. The space that you have matters a lot. Sometimes I coach people in meditation, and I ask them, so where do you sit? Or what's your routine or something? And they just say, well, I just kind of sit wherever, whenever I feel like it, and I end up never sitting. And I go, well, that's probably why you're not sitting, because you don't have a designated time or space when you're practicing. I know when I lived in Boston before I joined this place, I would intentionally every day just go to a different group, because I knew I didn't have the willpower in my noisy house filled with a bunch of people to really practice. And so I would just go to a different Dharma group each day, and knew in that container I would sit for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, and it was easy. Whereas if I was home, it was really hard to sit for 10 minutes without being distracted. Eventually I melded them together and got a bunch of people to live together where we had meditation in the schedule, but that's another Dharma talk I've already given. So, nutritional. What are the inputs we're taking? What are the surroundings we're in? Who are our peer groups? Who are our friends? What communities are we part of? That all matters. The other part would be, this is kind of a very loose metaphor. So rest, I would equate with character. What are the choices, actions, decisions that you're making? Are you living in integrity with your intentions, with your values, with your aspirations, with your vision? A lot of times, I know for myself, I can come and sit down. It might take 5 minutes, it might take an hour, it might take 2 hours. Some amount of time I can clear through and get back into flow and feel really good and energized and concentrated. But for many years, it was a very deep mystery. How is it that I have this, and then just 12 hours later, I go down to sit again, and I'm just stuck and tense, and everything is hard again. And what happened between the end of that morning sit and the start of that evening sit, where in 12 hours I'm suddenly, probably 10 hours, I'm suddenly stuck again. And the fact of the matter is, in those 10 hours, I was doing a lot of things. And of course, this isn't the only reason, because meditation doesn't work linearly, but one of the main contributing factors was during the daytime, I was resisting, tensing up, disconnecting, falling into various meditation quote-unquote hindrances, like anger, anxiety, regret, disengagement, not caring. I was accumulating stuff throughout the day, the ways in which I wasn't showing up, the ways in which I knew I wasn't doing what I wanted to do, the ways in which I was choosing to not be engaged, choosing to not be focused, choosing to not want to show up. Because it would be easier to just let the reactive patterns play out, rather than actually show up moment to moment and be that authentic, true self. So likewise, when we do this attention training, if we spend 1 hour really trying to learn how to focus and pay attention, well, we spend the other 23 hours in a day trying to not focus, trying to not be alive, not be fully engaged, then we're sort of training two different muscles at the same time in a day. So, although in most places they always talk about just meditate, 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 it turns out your character really matters and your surroundings, your community really matter. Obviously, practicing meditation is important. Obviously, it works. But arguably, even more importantly, would be your character and your surroundings. In a Korean Zen monastery, for example, most of the beginner monks do very little actual meditation and actually spend a lot of their time cleaning the building, memorizing the chants, and just doing work. Because the first few months or years are just about become a good, honorable person. No point in giving you meditation instruction until you're living in basic integrity with what you signed up for. And then you can spend 10 hours a day meditating. But we'll do that once your life is in alignment with what you're saying you want to do. Of course, learning how to focus isn't just about not looking at your phone while out with friends on dinner or becoming better at your work. If that was the case, this would not be a spiritual community, and Sori would probably kick me out of the monastery because that's a terrible teaching to give. We practice focus not just to get better at our work, not just to do things better, but because on one hand, focus is a foundational skill. The Shinzen talks about this sort of triangle of, I forget how you phrase this now. It's like a power triangle, he calls it, where if you take any skill, any study of field, if you want to become a botanist, or you want to become a rocket scientist, you want to start a business, you have to learn marketing, you have to learn sales, you have to learn accounting, you have to learn product development, you have how to manage a team, hiring, HR, legal. There's a lot of different various skills you need to learn. If you want to be a rocket scientist, you need to learn rockets, you need to learn chemistry, you need to learn physics, you need to learn on and on and on. And if you boil it all down, he says, in a lot of these fields, at least in the science fields, a lot of it boils down to math. And if you know math really well, the rest of the fields will do, all the other skills you need to learn to do rocket science will be really good. In business, I'm not very as familiar in business, but my sense is the core skill in business is sales and maybe customer service. If you can get customers and keep them happy, that's probably at least half the equation in business. 20 probably knows better than me, so maybe I'll ask you later. Does that sound about right? And but even more foundational than mathematics, more foundational than getting sales, more foundational than customer support would be, can you even focus? Can I focus on studying? Can I focus on learning math? In pretty much any field, from boxing, martial arts, various sciences, to just carpentry, learning how to focus is fundamental. Being in the present, engaging with what's actually happening, rather than ideas about what's happening or what's supposed to be happening, is foundational for any skill. But even more importantly, learning how to focus lets us have a complete experience of what we're experiencing. If I'm not resisting my present experience, if I'm not resisting nature, reality, God, the universe, if there's no tension, no block, no filter between me and my experience, then whatever the experience is, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, can be fulfilling, can be satisfying, can be insightful, can be good in a way. And through that sort of enjoyment of a complete engagement, of no resistance, of complete peace with whatever's happening, I stop needing to crave what many of us do, which is something else to fill that void in our life or in our experience. That if I get this money, if I get this relationship, if I get this prestige, if I get whatever it is, or I stop having this other thing, if I stop having acne or something, or I stop whatever the thing is, then I'll finally be happy. Now, of course, our objective lives matter. Again, that goes back to the whole aspect of character and living in integrity with our values what we think is good and right. That's important, virtue, character, but that's separate from, are we perpetually always dissatisfied with what's happening, always thinking there's something else that will then make this situation okay? Is it okay how I am right now? Really what it boils, that most spiritual teachings boil down to is, am I willing to surrender to what's happening right now? Actually, today I was listening to a podcast between Stephen Colbert, I'm assuming most of you know, talk show, late night host. Stephen Colbert is a late night TV host. He's also a very spiritual person and has a very deep Catholic faith, even though he was atheist during his college years. And, I really appreciate him because he suffered a lot of early childhood suffering. His father and two of his siblings died when he was a child, and that left a real deep mark on him, and yet at the same time, he's a very joyous, ethically, from appearances, seems to be a solid person. And he was having a conversation with the host, and the host was talking about magical thinking, because Stephen as a child used to have a lot of, this is a very random tangent, I think it's good. He used to go in closets with friends and weave what he called like auditory tales. Just the sort of auditory experiences about flying in space or something, and liked this magical thinking because it kind of brought him out of pain he was in and kind of could go into a different world. Which I think a lot of us do this to some extent, where we fantasize about whatever, sort of escape whatever's happening right now. And the host was sort of like, oh, so that's kind of like religion, right? That's like the idea of God or something. And or faith. That's kind of like faith, isn't it? Because you have to like kind of believe something that's you don't know and it's kind of magical, and whatever. And Stephen said, no, I differentiate like religion, God, faith with magic, because in magic, you're trying to get God to do what you want. I'm making some sort of spell to get something that I want. Which, to be honest, was how I prayed when I was a child. But he defined faith as willing to surrender. It's the surrendering of, in my opinion, to having faith and trust in God, the universe, Tao, whatever you want to call it, of reality. Willing to actually accept and fully embrace what's happening right now. So similarly, if we can do that, we can train that systematically with our concentration. And when we experience that full, complete surrendering to the experience, or even a small fraction of it, as I think all of you have experienced to some degree, I imagine, it is extremely enjoyable. And those years of chasing after wealth or other things to fill that gap is suddenly fulfilled, at least temporarily. And in that way, those algorithms like Google or Facebook or TV ads or social, communal pressures about what we're supposed to do suddenly don't matter so much. Because I am innerly fulfilled in a way that I was always chasing these other things to feel fulfilled. And in that way, we no longer are enslaved, controlled by these very impressive billion-dollar projects meant to control us, to capture us, to tell us what we want or need. In that moment, by fully engaging in our experience, being at peace, not needing anything else, that link is severed. And in that way, we can act ethically, we can act more responsibly, because those underlying seeds of hatred or delusion or craving or attachment aren't there anymore. They're weakened. They're at least temporarily not controlling us. And then we can see things more clearly, and then we can actually choose to do what our unique self is called to do. What are we actually, if I'm fully surrendered, connected to all things in the world, then my actual vow, my actual mission in life, my actual purpose in this moment becomes alive. And I can accept it because I'm not distracted about doing something else. And it can be really simple as just getting a cup of tea to someone else in the room. Or it can be as big as Peace Pilgrim, having a vision of, I want to dedicate the rest of my life walking across the country in the name of peace. But the point is that up until that moment, we don't know what it's going to be. Not really. It's really magical. Or just scientifically the way. Yeah, I think that's fine. I'm getting nervous as well to tell me to look at the time. So I guess I'll just clear up one other thing that Shinzen talks about, which is there are at least 4 types of attention. We divide up the axis based on space and time. A lot of people who study Zen or think they studied Zen hear this phrase, one-point concentration, and they think that means, oh, I'm supposed to focus on one object and nothing else, and that's what concentration is. Which is one form of concentration, but it's not the only form of concentration. Concentration can take on many forms, focusing can take on many forms. So spatially, we can choose to focus narrowly on one thing. Maybe it's a grain of wood on the floor, maybe it's my breath, maybe it's body sensations, maybe it's the sounds of the birds chirping outside. There are many things I can focus my attention on. I could try to include everything, all the sights I see, all the feelings, both physically and emotionally I'm feeling, all the sounds, both my thoughts and the universe around me. I can have a very wide focus range. That's perfectly fine. Just as good as having one single narrow object. So that's at least 2 ends of the spectrum. And then time-wise, you can focus on one object for a long amount of time, noticing every nuance of your breath, for example, or again, picking a visual object and just paying attention to that object and noticing how it changes or doesn't change. Or you can let your attention wander, and whatever grabs your attention, you can then focus on it for what they say, momentary concentration. So there's a sound, pay full attention to it. There's a sight, pay full attention to it. Feeling, paying full attention to it. And in that way, there's a spatial component of either spending as long as possible on whatever your focus object is, or letting yourself, or really letting the universe pick the focus object for you, and you just fully let yourself feel that, and then experience that, on and on and on. And in that way, focusing is something that you can do. Concentration is something you can do all the time. When you're driving a car, you can focus on what's important when you're driving a car. The other cars around you, how fast you're going, any sights around you. If I'm cooking, I can pay attention to the smell and visuals. If I'm interacting with someone, I can pay attention to their body language, to the words they're saying, or I can notice the impact of what's coming up in me as they're talking and how I'm receiving this conversation. And that way you can make focusing, concentration, part of every moment. There's a very famous meditation teacher, Deep, who one of our bedrooms is named after, who was the teacher of many of the Western insight mindfulness teachers like Jack Kornfield and Joseph Goldstein and Sharon Salzberg and all the giants in Western Buddhism. And she was a very humble householder. Sawyer really likes Peace Pilgrim, I really like Deepa Ma. So Deepa Ma was just a householder, Indian woman who, as far as I know, never lived as a nun or monk or monastic at all. Just a householder, did a few retreats, and by all accounts was fully enlightened and had many, many abilities and powers. And She was great because she lived in this apartment, very small apartment, probably smaller than anything we have in Burlington, and she had her family with her, and she had her neighbors. Her neighbors, everyone in the apartment building would come to her for instruction and help, and she would always tell people, you can always meditate. When you're feeding your baby, just notice every moment of what it's like feeding your baby. When you're taking a shower, notice every experience of taking a shower. And according to those reports, a lot of people in her apartment building attained very high realizations and was a huge inspiration as a householder. But this is something anyone can do, and it's not some magical special thing that only few special people in Japan or India achieve or something. If we just learn to surrender and concentrate on whatever is occurring, naturally, automatically, things will happen. So, take that time together to practice. We'll have 2 meditation periods, about 25 minutes each or so, during which time, if you ever feel the need to change your positioning or stretch or need anything, feel free to do that, but otherwise I'll give some basic meditation guidance. You're welcome to follow along, or if you want to give your own focusing technique, your own concentration technique, then feel free to do that. So we can begin by setting ourselves up physically in a good posture, in a way that keeps us grounded, making it easy for our weight to fall into our seat or into the floor. Having a straight back, upright chest, open, vulnerable. Not too proud like a overzealous soldier, or not collapsed like an office worker, but somewhere in the middle where the heart is open. Meeting the day, meeting the space. Having a pretty nice straight line from the top of your head all the way down to the bottom of your spine, almost as if someone grabbed a piece of string at the top of your head and is gently pulling up. You can keep your eyes closed or eyes open, putting your hands wherever feels comfortable. So to start, we'll do a noting practice where whatever grabs your attention, whether it's sights or sounds or feelings or thoughts, that's fine. You can just acknowledge and notice what's grabbing your attention, and then gently, intentionally have a full experience of that object. So if you hear the airplane, taste that airplane fully. If you feel your feet on the floor, you can have a moment of fully experiencing your feet on the floor. If you feel a body tension or anything in your body, just feel that fully. If you get particularly distracted, you can use mental labels, labeling the experience, and then having a full experience of it. So you can say something like, see, hear, or feel. Or if you want, you can create custom labels like thinking, foot, chair, heat, tension. In any case, the mental labels are optional to help you concentrate more, but they're not necessary or mandatory to focus. We'll do this for about 25 minutes or so. notice yourself particularly distracted, or noticing any tension or resistance or hesitancy, you can just note that and have a full experience of that. What's it like to have a full experience of thinking, a full experience of tension, full experience of being distracted. This is easy for you, that's great. Continue on. See if you can get to the point where it's just happening automatically, not requiring much conscious effort, but just automatically noticing, acknowledging, fully experiencing moment to moment. If this is hard for you, that's fine too. Just like in strength training, you're building those pathways when it's the most hardest. So bring yourself back to the focus object each time you get distracted. It's kind of like doing a rep, as they say. So you can take comfort in that your efforts aren't wasted. And that each time you bring yourself back, you're building concentration, you're building focus. Nice job, everyone. So as we focus on how we're experiencing whatever's happening now, paying less attention to what we want to experience. Not needing to have a special experience, but just paying attention to how fully am I engaging in each moment, how present am I, how focused am I in each moment. And break the habit of hatred and selfishness. The moment I'm going to ring the bell, it'll be a time for about 5 or 6 minutes where you can get water or stretch. If you can, I would suggest continuing doing this noting practice, noticing each moment where you're called to and having a full experience moment to moment. And then I'll hit the bell again about 5 or 6 minutes to get us back together for our second practice period. Nice jobs. Now we can play on the axis of space. Before we were doing momentary flips of high concentration, allowing our attention to naturally go towards whatever was most alive, most calling towards us, acknowledging it and having a full experience moment to moment, allowing that focus object to change. As an experiment, I would invite you, if you wish, to now try choosing one focus object, a narrow focus object. Maybe it's something in your sensory field, something you can see in the room. Try to keep eye contact with that and focus on that point. Maybe it's a sound, the birds chirping. If you have a sense of constant ringing in your ears, you can pay attention to that. Maybe you want to focus on a particular feeling object. Maybe your feet on the floor, your butt on your chair, your hands, your breath. But try to choose a narrow focus object. Somewhere, something you're either seeing, hearing, or feeling. And just try to stick with that, allowing everything else to be in the background. Not having any expectation of what's going to happen. Just gently putting your attention on it, coming back over and over. In the next 20, 25 minutes, we'll play with this dimensional space, expanding contraction or focus range. For now, let's start with a narrow focus object. If you're particularly distracted, you might need some extra oomph or force in putting your awareness on your focus object, but I would suggest, if possible, just trying to have a light awareness on it, just almost as if your awareness was a light bed sheet, and just laying it on top of the focus object, letting it rest there. Now, if you wish, you can expand out your focus object to the entire sense. So if you're listening to a particular sound, now focus on all the sounds. If you're focusing on a particular visual object, try to include everything that you're seeing. If you're focusing on a particular body sensation or part of your body, try to include any and all body sensations or a complete sense of the whole body. And just have a complete experience of that sense gate, that sensory organ, whether it's seeing, hearing, or feeling. Notice what that's like. Nice job. So for this third act, we can choose to either narrow your focus object. If you notice this is too spacey and easily falling into dullness or distracted, narrow your focus object, maybe including only a part of your body, only a part of your visual field, or only a certain direction or part of your hearing space. Or if you find this pretty enjoyable and easy, then try including another sense, or all the other senses. So if you've been paying attention to sounds, maybe try including feeling or sight. If you've been doing sight, then include hearing or body. If you've been paying attention to feeling, then you can include either sight or sound or both. Depending on whichever seems more appropriate for you, you can try either narrowing down your focus objects or expanding out to include even more senses. As you concentrate more and more, there can be a sense of letting go, accepting, allowing the experience to happen. less of I concentrating on this experience and more of a sense of I am allowing and surrendering for this experience to happen fully. So, this takes us to my favorite part of the evening, which is the discussion, open period. If anyone has reports, their experience, questions, comments, anything else they want to bring to the table, feel free to raise your hand and have a discussion.
I have a question. The first part of the meditation was easy for me and quite pleasant. I was able to focus on the sound of my breath, the sound of the wind outside, the sound of my heart beating. It just could go fairly easily from one to the other without having to think about anything. The second part, I decided I don't pay a lot of attention to visual information around me, so I was going to focus on that. And it was really, really hard. Really hard. And I had to almost fight with myself not to just go back to the sense of hearing and what I was doing before. And honestly, in the end, I did that because I just didn't want to end up with this struggle feeling. So my question is, how important is it as one continues to practice to challenge themselves out of what's comfortable? Is there value to trying to expand that?
Well, I suppose the answer would be depends on what you're aiming for. So we draw from a lot of different practices and traditions and methodologies, and one of them is Shinzen Young's unified mindfulness system. It's sort of a secular-based systematic approach where you can put any meditation technique, any contemplative practice, and it fits in this map and model. Just very useful to sort of understand on a principle level what's going on, rather than the lens of tradition or dogma or something of what's going on. The downfall that Shinzen acknowledges himself when he teaches his system is that because he has so many different techniques and has such a wide breadth of knowledge that he's sharing, people get this belief in them that they're supposed to master all the techniques. That if they're really good at one, really bad at another one, they're failing somehow. Or if they don't do all of them, they're failing somehow. And even though he says repeatedly, I'm not telling you you have to learn all these techniques, for some reason we just hear there's a lot of techniques, I'm supposed to learn all of them. So on one hand, you don't need to know everything. You don't need to necessarily do all the techniques. If the purpose that we're trying to cultivate here is concentration, so that we can get to the place where we are more and more concentrated, so that we're able to more and more then get insight into what's actually happening. Once we stop being pulled in a million different directions or keep going back into other places and actually can just pay attention and be aware of what our mind is doing, then we can gain insight into what's really happening, rather than the static and usual noise that's in some sense polluting our experience. So in that way, you don't necessarily need to learn other techniques. And a lot of traditional groups, whether it's Buddhism or Christianity or Sufi or something else, you only get one or two or three techniques for a very long time, maybe forever. And those people got fully awakened. So if it worked for them, I think it'll work for us. Now there are other reasons why you might want to cultivate those other techniques. a long time ago when I was much younger and trying out a lot of different things, there was a system of how to develop permanent memory. And part of that was creating what they call a memory palace, where you could vividly in your mind create objects in 3D and color and be able to zoom in and zoom out and move them and do all this stuff with your mind and your imagination visually. And I was very bad at it, and it actually felt like a workout every time I tried to do the exercises it prescribed. I ultimately just let it go after a week, because I was like, this is actually like felt exhausted when I had to go take a nap or something. I was like, this isn't worth it. I have a computer that can store information, so I eventually gave that up. But there are reasons why you might want to cultivate a very rich visual inner field for a lot of different reasons. It can be useful for concentration, it can be useful for creativity, it can be useful for a lot of different things. But here, where our main focus is about service and learning how to focus and ultimately gain insight about ourselves and the world and reality, I think it's okay if you don't learn other techniques. We're all naturally suited to certain strengths, certain areas, and naturally weaker in other areas. And that's okay, it's normal, it's fine. Why not play to our strengths when we can? There are other reasons why you might, later, that might become more interesting or needed. As a simple answer, I'll just say, wait until if that happens. Otherwise, why not just stick with what works? Until it maybe doesn't, or maybe it takes you all the way. So, can I answer your question?
Pretty much. It will give me something to think about.
Thanks for asking, because a lot of people have this sense of, wow, we did so many techniques, so I'm supposed to learn all of them or something. That's really...
Well, actually, part of my life, when I am gone for the winter, I meditate with a group of, it's led by monks from Sri Lanka, and it's a very set procedure, and it's the same every time. And I find that somewhat frustrating sometimes. So I do appreciate the learning different techniques, I really do. It's just that this visual thing made me feel like my eyeballs were on fire. So,
ultimately, each of
I
us...
may put that one on a shelf.
No need for that. And ultimately, each of us has to create our own practice and our own path. And so what that looks like is unique to each of us. And so it's good to be creative and playful and try out different things and find out what works for you.
Thank you.
So,
I experienced, you could say spacing out, but you could also say that I recognized that I was not concentrating continually on what I started with, when it was one focus. And I recognized at the same time that I was not thinking. So that's okay. I mean, it felt to me like I'm getting to where I need to be. So is there a problem with not continuing? Oh, I forgot about blah, 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 but maybe I just started that way. And then I got into this place where I'm like, nowhere. Is that okay?
sounds okay.
Yeah. But I don't know. And then when I recognized it, I returned. You know. Have you experienced that? As other people?
Just another rubric It sounds like you originally focused on the second period when we were focusing on one object, narrow object, and then you noticed that you got to sort of weren't continuously focusing on that, but you also weren't daydreaming or like, you know,
Right.
lost or anything like that either. It's sort of a spacey kind of place, like spacious kind of place.
Spacious.
Spacious.
Yeah, that's what it was. Not spacey, but spacious. Yeah.
Right. So another rubric of whether or not we're quote unquote hitting the target, as Story would say, would be in his, one of the systems he created, one of the things he teaches is this kind of triangle. And he says you're in the triangle if you're not actively thinking. It's not, and you're not, it's not about yourself, and it's not, you're not attached. Worst case scenario, if you're not having attachment to thoughts about yourself, then you're in the target. So, based on your report, if you're experiencing spaciousness, you're not actively thinking, you're not intentionally creating thoughts and following them, it's not about you, and you're not attached to any particular outcome or anything happening, then you can say you're in the target zone.
Yeah, it felt like the technique was to get there.
Yeah.
But
You also have many years of practice, done a lot of things, so it might be
maybe.
easier for you to access certain things. It sounds like you hit the target.
Okay.
Thanks for the report. Chris?
For the first half, I wasn't really tired until we started, and then I was very tired. And I was like, oh boy, I've got 25, 30 minutes left to go. I'm just gonna totally fall asleep here. And then we took a little break, and I was just not tired at all and very easy to focus. And I'm wondering what factors might play into that switch, because you know, as my general model of tiredness, wakefulness goes, it's like, well, if you're really tired here, it's like you're just gonna get more tired until you get some rest. And I'm not aware of having gotten rest, but maybe in some way I did, or I'm not sure what changed that.
So the first practice session, you noticed you were really sleepy.
Yeah, and just generally dull and just, out of control.
And then you took a break and then kind of walked around,
Yes.
maybe got water or used the bathroom or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we started the second one, you noticed immediately more wakeful.
Just very, yeah, very, very able to control my focus.
Well, you know, the issue of meditation and also these practices, unlike, say, measuring chemistry or something, is I don't know. So I have intuitions, I have pattern recognition, I have general principles. Ultimately, I can't say 100% confidence what happened, but I can give you some possibilities. It's funny too, because a lot of times in meditation I want to know what's happened, or what did happen, or what's happening. And sometimes it really doesn't actually matter. Really? Like the focus object, whatever's happening. So we recently did a retreat up in the Lowell property. We had some guest teachers come up, and one thing that Doug, one of the teachers, said, that Stories also said, and I've heard from other people, is that sleep can be one of the egos. Of course, the ego doesn't actually have a subjective experience or anything, but we just talk about it as if it does. The ego's last defense or favorite defense might be putting the subject to sleep. So trying to concentrate, trying to do this thing that's breaking homeostasis that my ego doesn't like, that's outside my normal behavior, and it'll throw thoughts at me, it'll throw desires at me, it'll throw memories at me, it'll throw plans at me, it'll throw ideas that the oven's still on, it'll just keep throwing things at me. And then, okay, this isn't working, put them to sleep. Let's try drowsiness and sleepiness. That almost always works. So that's one possibility. Is it's just a way for you to knock you out. You're experiencing or doing something feels dangerous or doesn't like. If you get too concentrated, you might start noticing things and have to change your life or have to process something that we would rather not process. Put them to sleep. One possibility. Another possibility could be that you actually were just tired, just physically tired. It's kind of warm in this room. It's sort of ideal conditions for taking a nap. Maybe you just felt tired, and to some degree, in my experience, you can actually kind of get rest when you're sort of falling asleep and trying to meditate. And naturally, a person's energy levels, in my experience, goes up and down, up and down, up and down. And so half an hour might be enough time that you went fully down the dip, you got some rest, and then you're cycling back up to wakefulness. That's a possibility. Another thing that I've told you before, but it's good for everyone to know that Soryu has said, and I've noticed a lot in my own practice, that unlike more objective, quote-unquote, scientific, measurable, external things, it's hard to see cause and effect as much, because the thing that we're studying is also the tool we're using to study is also the tool itself. So it's hard to see causality a lot of times. And so we'll do a technique, doesn't seem like it's working, but actually the impact or the effects lag behind by minutes or hours, maybe seconds. So I might be trying to cultivate a lot of energy or cultivate rest or compassion or whatever, and the first 5, 10, 20, 30, 60, 90 minutes might be a real slugfest. Doesn't feel like it's doing anything. But I just might not have broken through to the level of consciousness yet. And there's some deep stuff happening that I am not consciously aware of. Just gathering momentum, and eventually the impact, the effects happen. But it might be a lag of 10, 20, 30 minutes. And oftentimes we give up within seconds, saying this technique doesn't work, I'm going to do something else, rather than giving it sufficient time to really test whether or not this is working or not. At the end of the day, each of us have our own unique bodies and minds, so over time you can start seeing patterns about yourself and what happens. So it's good to sort of track that and notice that. I know for me, I did a solitary retreat for a few months last winter, not this year, but last year, and I journaled a lot. And somewhere in the middle of the retreat, I picked up a new notebook, and it turns out it was an old notebook that I had used a few years previous, or a year ago, and I had journaled in it, and I read the journal entry, and I went, wow, the thing that I'm experiencing on this retreat this week is exactly what I was experiencing on this retreat like a year ago. It's the exact same thing. I thought it was new and different, and a new challenge that I don't know what to do about, and I journaled about the exact same phenomenon, including what I think are the best solutions to that phenomenon. And I was like, I should just do this. I don't know why I'm like re-solving the same equation over and over, thinking it's a new equation and it's the same one. So, on one hand, it's nice to keep track of those kinds of things, and then your old self can remind your future self about that. And then to some degree, it's kind of like, to some extent, it almost doesn't matter. It's just concentrate, focus, relax, do whatever you can do to stay on your cushion. But those are three possibilities. Maybe just getting up and walking around is enough to get the blood moving. One day I hope you'll have enough cheap biology trackers that we can put on our bodies to measure everything and tell us what was going on. Maybe you ate a candy bar before the sit and the insulin spiked and then you're sleepy and then the body processed it and then you could get back to baseline. Who knows? Going from the very subtle to the emotional to just gross as in solid physical things. So, hard to say, but good to track. Time for like 1 or 2, okay?
I think it was during the first part when there was maybe a loud animal noise that was very startling to me. And I actually like was surprised by my own startle response and I gasped, you know, and I was kind of noticing or thinking about like afterwards, how when I am like, when I do meditate and there's a noise or something, I startle. I was thinking about being startled, like I don't think that noise would have startled me in the same way had I not been like meditating or relaxed. I was just wondering about if there's, I was just curious about being startled or, yeah, I don't know, an attention or, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I had like a fully formed question, but I was just curious about that. And then I was sort of also like, because I opened my eyes and everything, and I was like, some people are just so chill right now. So I was like, why am I, you know, it was just brought up a lot of questions for me. So I was curious.
Similar to Chris, everyone's different. I'll give you some possibilities without saying this is your experience. I know there's at least been one research study that actually showed that meditators have less of a startle response. Supposedly harder to startle deep meditators when they're in deep meditation. But one possibility, you said that normally you think if you're in a relaxed mood, you want to get startled. So it's weird. Why is it when I'm meditating, I'm more sensitive to the startle?
I think if I'm relaxed, I'm more sensitive. I don't think I'm usually relaxed. That's kind of what I'm saying.
Right.
But, yeah.
Yeah, so one option could be that in normal everyday life, we have all these layers we're wearing, and it's really hard for anything to really impact us in the first place. You know, I could go a whole afternoon and suddenly end up here and go, what did I just do the last 2 hours? I don't even know. Or I go on a drive and I completely don't remember anything about the drive. And I just end up at a destination because I'm lost in thinking about stuff or planning things or whatever, that I'm not actually present to what's happening, so nothing can really come through in the first place. And we see this when we walk around the city, and it just seems like people are in their own bubbles, just drifting past each other, and doesn't seem like people are present and here. So like you said, to some extent it could be that you're meditating and finally those layers are relaxing, which allows the world to impact us more, which is what I said about surrendering to whatever's happening, allowing that to happen, accepting that to happen, not needing to always habitually be on guard with reality. Beyond that, it's hard to say exactly. Everyone's individual, has their own kind of response and reactions. So one option could be that you're relaxing more, you're letting experience in more, so you naturally have a reaction to what's happening rather than what we normally do, which is not let our experience in and preoccupied with other things that aren't present. It's possible to get to the point where you concentrate so much where I can just look at this dot and I don't hear anything. I don't hear any sounds because I'm so focused on a visual object, or I'm paying so much attention to a sound that I lose complete sense of my body. That's a very high level of concentration that for most of us will only achieve on a retreat, perhaps. But for someone like that, they won't get started because all of their mental focus is on one object that something else can't impact them. But we practice general mindfulness, so I don't know if we're really necessarily aiming for that on these Sunday gatherings. That's just a possibility if you want to explore that more in depth. It has its own value. Just learn to let go of the guards and have the power to choose when I can relax, where I can relax, and really let the world startle us. You know, the vulnerability to let us be startled in the first place, rather than needing to protect ourselves and choosing to be habitually guarded rather than occasionally startled. At least having that power to choose is one of the reasons.